I spent months planning this event, and within a few hours, everything just started to completely fall apart. What I thought was about to be my biggest business win of the year ended up teaching me lessons I couldn't have learned anywhere else. What actually happened. If we've never met before, my name is Rayanne Hamuda. I'm the owner of The Brow Mommy, a permanent makeup studio based in Hamilton. And beyond brows, I am obsessed with building businesses. I love taking my ideas, testing them in the real world, and then sharing the wins, the failures, and everything in between. A few weeks ago, I decided to take my tooth gems to the Rose Picnic, a large luxury outdoor event, and instead of doing everything myself, I built an entire team around this activation. We hired installers, built a sales... Wait, hang on. When I say we, I mean me. I hired installers, built a sales process, created appointments, flows, trained staff, even brought permanent makeup into the mix because I thought the two businesses would complement each other. But boy, was I wrong. Some of those decisions that I made were the best I've made. Others completely fell apart the second the event started. So here's what we're going to unpack in today's video. First, I'll show you how I built this entire event around one goal, creating a business that didn't need me to be there, constantly installing tooth gems, running back and forth, just have the entire thing run itself. Then we'll talk about the assumptions that completely fell apart once customers actually started walking up to our booth. I'll show you why we changed our pricing in the middle of the event and the one problem that completely blindsided us. Lastly, I'll also talk about everything I would do differently going into the next event. And at the very end, I'll answer the question everybody's probably here for. Was the Rose Picnic actually worth attending as a vendor? Before we talk about everything that went wrong, I think it's important to explain what I was actually trying to build. Because contrary to what it may have looked like on Instagram, this wasn't just another booth pop-up for me. This wasn't just another vendor event. This was a business experiment. And I went into it with a goal that made almost everyone around me think I was absolutely insane. I wanted to do $40,000 in a day. Now, before you click off thinking, wow, this bitch is delusional, trust me, I knew it was an aggressive goal. But here's the thing, I didn't pull that number out of thin air. There was actually a strategy behind it. Looking at the attendance they were expecting, our pricing at the time, how many installers we had, and how many appointments we could realistically complete, the math actually made sense if everything went to plan. But obviously it didn't. But we'll come back to the numbers later because one of the biggest assumptions I made turned out to be completely wrong. But for now, just know this. I wasn't chasing $40,000 because I was expecting to hit it. I was chasing it because big goals force you to build differently. If my goal was only $5,000, I probably would have half-assed it, shown up with one chair, folding table, and just hoped for the best. But a $40,000 goal forced me to think like an owner of a company instead of just a technician or a service provider. It forced me to ask questions I'd never asked myself before. How many people do I need to hit that goal? What systems need to be in place? Where are the bottlenecks? What happens if I'm not the one doing the installs? That's the real reason I set such a ridiculous goal. Not because I thought it wasn't guaranteed, but because it forced me to build something much bigger than I am and much bigger than I probably would have. So I started asking myself, if I wasn't the one installing tooth gems, what would this business actually look like? I grabbed a whiteboard and literally started mapping out the customer journey from beginning to end. Not just the installation, the entire experience. What happens the second someone walks by our booth? How do we grab their attention? Who greets them? What questions are they going to ask? Where do they pay? Who's responsible for making sure they purchase the right package? How do we stop installers from constantly getting interrupted? How do we create an experience that's organized, efficient, and actually enjoyable? Every single touch point had to have a purpose, because if the business was going to grow, it couldn't rely on people just figuring it out between each stage of the customer journey. That's when I landed on what I thought was a pretty solid system. Every customer started at the front of the booth. We had one person whose job was both sales and cashier. Their responsibility wasn't just taking payment. It was educating the client, answering questions, explaining the pricing, helping them choose a design, and once they were ready, processing the payments. Every client, once they paid, received their aftercare card and our guarantee card right at checkout. I wanted people leaving that interaction already feeling confident before they even sat in the chair. The guarantee card wasn't just a piece of paper either. It immediately answered one of the biggest questions people had. What happens if my tooth gem falls off? Instead of waiting for them to ask, we answered it before it became a concern. Once payment was complete, the client moved over to one of the installers. The installer's job was very, very simple. Check the receipt, confirm the crystal before touching the client's tooth, complete the installation, walk through the aftercare, offer additional gems as like an upsell while they were already sitting in the chair, then on to the next client. I wanted my installers focused on one thing, delivering a great experience, not answering pricing questions, not processing payments, just installing. But I didn't stop there. I kept thinking, how can I turn a tooth gem customer into a brow customer? My assumption was that if someone trusted us enough to get a tooth gem installed by us, maybe they'd also be interested in permanent makeup. So every tooth gem client received a $250 voucher towards a permanent makeup service. The idea was very simple. They'd finish their appointment, walk over to the Brow Mommy table, learn more about permanent makeup, and if they loved what they saw, they could redeem the voucher towards a full price brow appointment. On paper, I thought it was brilliant. In reality, it completely flopped. And honestly, that failure probably taught me more than anything else we tested that weekend, which brings me to lesson number 2. I was going after the wrong customer. And I know that sounds obvious now. Thinking back, it should have been obvious, but when I was planning this event, it genuinely made perfect sense in my head. Tooth gems, permanent makeup, beauty services, women investing in themselves. I thought they naturally belonged together. That's why I built an entire strategy around introducing tooth gem clients to permanent makeup. But once the event started, I realized something almost immediately. The girls who were getting excited about tooth gems were mostly younger. They were much more price conscious. Meanwhile, my typical permanent makeup client is completely different. She's usually a little older. She's established in her career. She has more disposable income, and she's making a completely different buying decision. So permanent makeup it's not really an impulse purchase. It's an investment. Tooth gems are the opposite. They're fun. They're spontaneous. They're something you do because you're already out having a great day. Those were two completely different buying behaviors, and it didn't really click. I wasn't selling the wrong product. I was just selling to the wrong audience. The permanent makeup table wasn't a bad idea. It was just the wrong place. And the one thing I've learned in business is that the market doesn't care how much time you've spent planning something. If your customers are telling you an idea doesn't fit, you listen. Don't argue with them. So before the event was even over, I made the decision to kill that sales table. Future tooth gem events will focus only on tooth gems. Future PMU events will focus only on PMU. Could there be some overlap? Absolutely, but not enough to justify building an entire event strategy around it. Which naturally brings us to the next lesson, pricing. This one hurts, not financially, emotionally, because when you spend weeks planning something, researching, building signs, printing menus, training your team, becoming attached to the decisions you've made, because I know I did, I genuinely believed our pricing made sense. Then the event started, and within the first few hours, I started hearing the same thing over and over again from people. It's too expensive. Older clients just were not interested in doing it. There was a lot of maybes. There wasn't really a conversation where people were like, yeah, I would totally do this right now. One person saying they don't like the price is one thing, but then 20, 30 people walking past the table saying the price is too much just did not help me. I could not defend it. So we had to pivot in the middle of the event. It's either I stay stuck to my pricing and don't make sales, or we pivot. And it honestly bruised my ego because dropping your prices in the middle of an event almost feels like you're admitting that you were wrong. It's admitting that you're wrong, but it's fine. Even talking about it is a little bit embarrassing. But I wasn't there to prove I was right. I was there to learn. This wasn't a reflection of my worth. I really needed to just not take it personally. It wasn't even a reflection of the business itself. It just was data. I had to take it as it is. It was information. That's it. I had never done an event like this before. I had no historical sales data, no conversion rates, no benchmark, no idea how people would even respond. So everything was built based on educated guesses. And that's exactly what this event was. A giant experiment. And experiments are supposed to challenge your assumptions. If everything goes exactly the way you planned, you probably didn't test anything. So we changed the pricing right there in the middle of the event. We reprinted nothing. We didn't overthink it. We adapted. And almost immediately, people became much more comfortable buying. The booth became alive. Girls started bringing their friends over. One appointment turned into two turned into three. We had a whole lineup at some point. Suddenly, all the installers were busy. At some point, I had to jump in to make sure that we're getting through people as fast as possible. The cashier didn't even get a chance to breathe. So, dropping the prices was honestly a terrifying decision to make in the middle of the day. I'd spent weeks planning this event. Every number had been thought through. Every sign had already been printed. So changing everything halfway through the day felt completely backwards. But within minutes, everything changed. It was like someone flipped a switch. Suddenly, people weren't just stopping to look. They were buying. One girl brought over another, then groups started forming around the booth. Every chair was full. My vision was finally coming to life, which was amazing. It was really crazy and hard to do, but here we are. I remember while I was installing tooth gems, I was looking around for a bit and every chair occupied, my team focused, customers waiting, people smiling as they looked in the mirror. And I thought, wow, this is what I was trying to build. That single decision to drop the prices changed the entire trajectory of the day. For the first time, that day, I felt like we'd cracked it. We did it, guys. We were on it. We were hot. We were on fire. And then, as how all things go, the next big problem jumped at us. I spent months preparing for the Rosé picnic. We practiced the installs. We trained the team. We built our systems. We tested our workflows. But there was one thing I never tested. It was the environment. We were outside in the middle of a hot summer day, and the heat completely changed the way our materials behaved. It was hardening before it even came into contact with the client's tooth. We were quickly able to solve this by ensuring installs only happened in the shade and keeping the products cool with a fan. But when I tell you I had a heart attack, I'm not kidding. I literally had a heart attack. I thought the entire day was ruined. So, was the Rosé picnic actually worth it? I think the answer depends on how you measure success. From a guest perspective, absolutely. The event completely lived up to its name. The atmosphere was beautiful. People were dressed up. They were glammed up. The DJ kept the energy high. Guests looked like they were genuinely enjoying themselves. And you can tell, honestly, that the organizers put a tremendous amount of work into creating an experience people would remember. And I want to acknowledge that because events like this are incredibly difficult to pull off. I spent weeks planning one activation, one booth, one business, and that on its own honestly felt so fucking overwhelming. I can only imagine the scale and the amount of planning, coordination, and problem solving that goes into organizing an entire festival with hundreds of vendors and over like 1,000 attendees. Looking at it purely as a vendor though, my experience is a little more complicated. Before the event, vendors were told to expect somewhere between 2,500 and 3,600 attendees. Naturally, that's what I built my entire strategy around. Staffing, inventory, pricing, revenue projections, literally everything. Looking back, my estimate is that attendance felt much closer to 1,000 to 1,200 people. Now, I could be completely wrong. That's simply what it felt like after spending the entire day interacting with guests, which is exactly why I reached out afterwards asking for the attendance data. I just wanted to understand the context behind my own results. As vendors, we already assume so much risk. We pay for our booth, we invest in inventory, we hire staff, we spend weeks preparing, we take time away from our businesses, and we accept that not every event is going to be a home run. That's just kind of part of being an entrepreneur. But if you're going to take that risk, and be going to events like this, at least let it be a calculated one, because without the numbers, I have no benchmark. Let's say 3,000 people actually attended the event and I only converted a small percentage of them. That's valuable information. It tells me my strategy wasn't strong enough. Maybe my booth didn't stand out. Maybe my pricing was wrong. Maybe my messaging wasn't clear. Maybe my offer wasn't compelling enough. That's on me. And that's exactly the kind of feedback I'd want to have. But if attendance was closer to 1,000 or 1,200 people and I converted somewhere between 50 to 100 people at the event, then that's a completely different story. That's about 1%. Going into the Rosé Picnic, my goal was never to serve everyone. I was just trying to capture roughly 1% of the audience that attended. And if that's what actually happened, then in that case, the strategy worked far better than I would have given it credit for. And that means, we did a great job in comparison to how many people actually attended the event. Those are two completely different conclusions. And without the attendance data, I can't honestly tell you which one is true. That's one thing I've learned about working in business. Opinions don't improve companies. Data does. If you don't know what actually happened, you can't make better decisions next time. You're just guessing. And I don't want to build businesses based on guesses. I want to build them based on evidence, which is exactly why I reached out to the organizers after the event, hoping they could give me this information. I sent a follow-up email. I still haven't received anything. Guys, come on. I liked going to the Rosé Picnic. I want to be there again next year. But at the end of the day, I can't control that. What I can control is what I do with everything I learned. And honestly, that's what the Rosé Picnic was really about. I walked into the event with a lot of assumptions and I walked away with experience. I now understand my customer much better. I understand event pricing much better. I have a better operating system and I've uncovered problems that I never would have discovered sitting at home trying to plan everything perfectly. We already have more events lined up and I'm genuinely excited because now I'm not starting from zero and I actually have some data to help me build the next event even better. Next up is Festival of Friends and I can't wait to see what happens when I apply everything I've learned from this event. So if you've enjoyed this video and you want to, follow me on this little journey of mine, make sure you hit subscribe and I'll be posting a recap and a summary of how the next event goes. So finger crossed it does a little bit better. Bye guys.